Right on time. We were waiting on you guys. And can you start the roll call?
Sure.
Ooh, that's not
Happy
good.
New Year.
Happy New Year. That's nice.
In the Virgin Islands?
Commissioner Santacroce.
Then I got these things.
We're taking
David.
attendance.
David.
He's
Here,
here.
sorry. He was talking to me.
Sorry.
Commissioner
Your fault.
Alcalali.
You're going to separate you guys right now, I
Yeah.
think.
Probably a good idea.
I teach
Ali, move over there where I can see you.
Okay, Commissioner Alcalali.
In the corner.
Commissioner Walton. Commissioner Evans. Commissioner Obman. Commissioner Caldwell.
Present.
Commissioner Birch.
Present.
Commissioner Billups.
Present.
We have a quorum.
It's like she didn't call us.
I can
It's like,
start it.
I know you're here.
Commissioner
Okay.
Totoro.
Okay. And before we move to approve the agenda, could we have a motion if there are any amendments to it?
So moved.
And so we have a motion to add an item.
I'm sorry, someone moved and approved this, the minutes.
Oh no, because they're after this.
Oh, it's the agenda.
Yeah.
I apologize. It was seconded?
Don't scare me.
I'm sorry, it was seconded.
Okay, so we have a motion right now to amend the agenda to add an item regarding the budget. We discussed the budget at our last meeting. We don't have any changes in there.
It's seconded.
All in favor of adding the budget item?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Well, I'm sorry. There will be discussion before the vote to approve it, or, sorry, just,
No, it was just, sorry, you want me to go there? Move to approve, seconded, then discussion, right? And then, I don't know if there was any discussion of adding this budget item.
and then a vote on that.
Correct. No, correct, on that whole agenda.
Okay.
I think probably the rule is to discuss if you're going to add anything and one vote on the agenda. Why to vote twice on?
Because the parliamentary rules are you first move the approval of the agenda, then you second that, then it's open for discussion. You
And
can't
then-
discuss it before you have to move it first.
And Ali, you meant discuss the budget. You didn't mean discuss adding the item, right?
I don't want to confuse it any more than.
Okay. It's now been added to the agenda.
I thought I knew what you meant.
Close enough, I think.
All right. So now we are at the public comment stage. If there were anyone here, we would invite them to make a public comment, but there is not. All right, so we have a special presentation from Leslie Stambaugh, who's the chair of the Human Rights Commission. Everybody had some reading to do, and we are going to have a conversation about trespass and a special presentation rather.
Right.
So,
I'll present. While the city of Ann Arbor was waiting for this group to be established, waiting anxiously, the Human Rights Commission managed to take something that would have come to you had you been involved, existed at that time. And we became embroiled in questions involving police policies and practices around trespass. The incident that triggered this happened at the Blake Transit Center in 2017. It was an incident involving a group of young black men who hesitated when they were asked to leave the police station, the transit center. One of them was videoed being forcibly handcuffed, and it was later learned that he was read trespass. The video of this incident became viral. Citizens flocked to the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission demanding to know what the heck trespass was anyway. How could such a situation happen in Ann Arbor, of all places? And how could this man, or people like him who relied on the bus to go to school every day, be prohibited from using the transit center for a whole year, which was the punishment of being read trespass. we listened to the citizens, and we started some discussions with the AAPD, with the city attorney, did some of our own research, and as a result, some changes were made, especially in the form, but also in the policy of trespass. But we think more was needed. You were coming on board, and we wanted to wait until you were ready to include you in this process. We think other issues remain, and now that the commission's up and running, we'd like your participation and eventually your ownership of this important effort. I thought what I'd do, and tell me if this makes sense to you, is to just go over briefly what trespass is, why it's important, and what we think needs to be done, left to be done, and then open it up to discussion. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes.
Okay. First, a disclaimer, of course.
Excuse me, Leslie,
Yeah,
and thank you very much. Could you just speak up a little bit more?
Certainly.
Thanks.
all right, certainly try to. Let me know, though, if you can't hear me. I'm not an attorney. The Human Rights Commission has a lot of attorneys, and we still don't all understand this completely. It has changed so much since we've been in touch with it. So I'm not going to be able to answer everything, and I probably will make a mistake here or there, but I think this is the best information that we have, and it was not easy to get, and I've been told that it's close to being right. Okay, so let's start with trespass. What is it? Let me start with something simple. This is what Chief Baird said to me when I started asking him what trespass was. He said, imagine you're in your home and somebody knocks on the door and you let them in and they start talking and you start feeling uncomfortable for some reason, whatever it is, and you ask them to leave and they refuse. You have a right as a property owner to prevent anybody who doesn't have a legal right in your on your property to get them to force them to be off your property, and so you call the police, and the police will enforce that right for you by reading trespass.
The police, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear, I'm sorry. The police will what?
Enforce that right.
Okay.
You have a right to your privacy on your property, or in your car, or on your lawn, or whatever. So the police completes this trespass notice. It's a very nice notice. It's a 3-part carbonless form. The form is basically, it's one page. It has information about the police's badge number and the time he came. It takes information from the person who is alleged to have trespassed. It gives what they call the facts, circumstances, and activities relevant to the issuance of trespass notice. There are 2 lines for that. Has information about the person who reported the incident, and then it has an address and a description of the place that he is not allowed to now return for a whole year. The policeman will give the first copy, will keep the first copy and file it with records. The yellow copy goes to you, the homeowner, and the pink copy goes to the alleged trespasser. This is called reading trespass. It's not a crime. You don't get any criminal documentation that you've committed a crime. However, you are in the system, and if you return to this property in a year or less, you will be charged a crime, and then you are charged trespass, which is a misdemeanor, and by state and by the laws of the state and the city ordinance that covers trespass, you could be in prison in the county in a county jail for up to 30 days and pay a fine of no more than $250. AAPD policy states that it's usually charged as a 30-day misdemeanor.
And that would be if you have returned to the place where you were read the trespass before
Exactly.
that time. It's called criminal trespass now?
Yes.
Okay,
Whereas the other is called informational trespass.
okay.
Okay?
May I have a question? Supposedly that you were asked to leave and you did not leave. Does this now become more of, you charge this person?
Ye-
Or still part of the reading?
It's a good question, and if you refuse to leave, you are immediately arrested and charged with criminal trespass. And you are,
If the owner asks the person to leave,
oh, and then
and
they,
they refuse, then the owner calls the police.
right.
But if the police ask them to leave and they refuse, then it becomes criminal trespass.
Right then and there on the spot.
Right, yeah,
Most people leave
Yeah.
with that warning.
Right.
And then the question is, do they come back in a year? And if they do, does someone call to say this person's
Right.
trespassing?
But your question is valid. If the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
person
yeah.
then, when the police came, refused to go,
Yeah.
then they would get the criminal trespass.
Exactly.
I wondered about if this person who's being asked to leave was either a minor or has like mental health issues and not fully comprehending.
It's
being
a very good
escalated.
question, but no, there are two lines here that say what the facts, circumstances, and activities relevant to this trespass notice is, and it can say anything, but it is, there's no justification necessary. There's no real examination of why the person is asked to leave. If it's your house, it's easy to understand because it's your house and you don't want this person in your house. But that is my point, is that it is very rarely your house that is in question. It's usually a public place, public accommodation, or a public place that's a resource.
do
And that's
we
if-
know, do we have those statutes? That's it, because the majority that I'm aware of are on private property.
Private property like a business.
Yeah.
Well, private property like a business is could be a public,
It's private.
a public,
No,
Yeah, I think they're saying it differently.
okay.
So about the sidewalk in front of a business?
Yeah, you mean, Leslie's talking about like a business,
A restaurant, a bar.
and so that's not public in that, like, the library is public.
right.
But she means a place to which the public has access.
Correct.
Jump
Or,
in.
yes.
Zainab.
I realize this is likely a rare situation, but what about cases where the owner is fine with the presence of the person, but the police ask them to leave?
That doesn't happen.
That I've witnessed it before.
Yes, we have heard that that happens.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to happen. The law says owner, occupant, or agent of owner occupant. Sometimes there are about 40, we understand about 40 businesses where the owner has given agency to the police.
Yeah.
And that means that the police can act as owners, I think.
And so it would have to be, legally, it should be one of those 40
Right,
places.
Right, it would have to be one of those, and say, for instance, the manager is working, if it was a restaurant or a retail store or something, and the manager isn't necessarily the agent for the owner, but the police are.
Do we have a list? Do we know what those
Yeah.
40 places are?
No, we don't, and I've asked for it, I've also asked what the form looks like, and if they're told anything, if they're given any education about what you're allowed to trespass for. Because there are there's at least one big caveat, you cannot discriminate on the basis of protected classes that are protected under the non-discrimination ordinance in your trespassing.
But if Zainab were witnessing it,
Right.
she would have no way of knowing if that were
It
one
would
of the
under the
40
40 or
places,
not.
or
Right.
if it were not.
That's right.
And that makes it quite murky in terms of,
It's one of the many things that make it murky,
okay,
yes.
sorry to
Oh,
add
no,
to the
no,
murk.
No, I'm glad.
I'm writing this question down. Keep going, Leslie, sorry.
Okay. Let's see. So why do we think it's important? First of all, you should know that there's approximately, at least, we only got statistics for 2014 to 2017. And during that time, per year, there was about one trespass per day.
One
I
a
think-
day?
Yes, one a day. there are 332 on the average during those 3 years.
For the year?
For the
Per
year.
year?
Yes.
2015 to 2018?
2014 to 2017.
I'm sorry, I got that totally.
Do we have a breakdown as to what made up those 332? Were they businesses? Were
Okay.
most of them at Blake? Were they,
We have
or
no.
the ethnicity of people who were red trespass or where or
We
anything?
don't have
We-
ethnicity, but we did have the top, where the top, like, 5 were or something. There's like one of the reports that police had that said like, I think Blake was in like the top 5 places
Top five.
of where they were called, and I believe they were all downtown.
All done.
Okay, I have not seen that list. That would be interesting, but I don't think I've
I
seen that.
thought at our last meeting, we said you guys did have that.
Don't think I have.
Okay.
Can I ask, I'm sorry
But
to
that's-
interrupt. Are these informational trespass or criminal?
That's a good,
No, that's a
that's a
good
good
question.
question. That's the only statistic I have, by the way, unfortunately, and we've asked for the other.
So we don't
stati-
know,
They do not have, evidently, they have to hand count statistics. I mean, we've certainly asked for them, we've not gotten very many. The only one we've gotten is that of the 331.6 average trespasses during that period, 289.5 were informational, and 13%, or 42.6, were criminal reports.
Wait, 13%?
13% were criminal.
So,
Most of them are informational.
70.
1 out of 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what- but what that
83% of the
means-
people listen.
For us, one of the issues are that the informational trespass is a punishment without anybody looking at it. You don't talk to a magistrate, you don't do any, at least with the criminal, you do. And you can explain your case and you can get some sense of whether if somebody feels it's justified. With the trespass, the informational trespass, it's sort of a punishment without any investigation at all. And that,
So, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you go first.
Most of these, from what I can infer, are they're cited at the Blake Transit Center, the library, and Briarwood Mall.
Blake Transit, Delonis Center, Courthouse Square Senior Apartments, Ann Arbor Public Library, and Starbucks at 300 South Main.
That's the top 5?
And these are for 1 year of November 6, 2018 through November 6, 2019.
Wow.
Can you circulate that to the group?
yes, I'd like to get that too. I have not seen that. And those are important. So notice that these are places where, some of them are public facilities, like the library, like Transit Center. Delonis is something that, not to be able to go there for a year could be a serious problem for a lot of people. So it's not like a private house. And one of the things I'm going to argue is that the 1 year blanket punishment is really too severe for a lot of things, especially because these are not examined. There's there are trespasses and there are trespasses. There's no considerations or special circumstances
Exemptions.
considered, anything.
So can I ask can I ask a question and make a quick comment? Or do you want me to wait?
Go.
Yeah.
The comment is, I think people's motivations and trigger marks for where they're gonna call differ based, right? So I think Delonis would be, even though they have a lot, would be pretty different than,
Sure.
and the library different than them, and they're all different than Starbucks.
Sure.
And I was at this meeting, but I just want to be clear. If I got a trespass tomorrow, just the information, I don't have there's no means to contest that.
Okay.
Unless I come back and risk and do something to then initiate the criminal process where I can go argue about whether I was trespassed appropriately the first time. But the question is, do I have a step before that
Yes.
to pursue?
Yes.
One of the changes that we asked for and we got, although they said that it was always available, but no one knew about it, was an appeal process. And the appeal, I mean, it's not defined very well, but the appeal is that the person you go to, by the way, is not the policeman, not the agent, even if there's an agent there, it's the owner. And you'd have to go to the owner without stepping on their property. So you'd have to.
You can call an email, right?
You could call an
Right.
email, except you are not only are you not given an email, you are not given any information about them at all. That's what's blacked
Right.
off here. But you can go and negotiate, get it rescinded, and hopefully
But
the
that's not-
process will include the fact that they will report that to the
But that's not an appeal process, that's going to beg
That's right.
someone's
Exactly.
forgiveness.
Exactly.
For something you may not have done in the first instance.
Exactly.
you don't- yeah.
There is no neutral party doing this.
So ultimately, if you want to challenge, and I'm going through this with a woman who is in our neighborhood, in my neighborhood quite frequently, when I learned of the situation. Ultimately, the only way to say, I didn't trespass in the first instance, is to do it again and and risk a criminal record.
Yes.
Or to contact the people who
Well, I
said
know,
you
but-
trespassed
yeah, but
and they didn't believe you
that's
anyway.
not a-
That's
not
right.
a different-
Yeah,
that-
yeah.
There's no
Yeah, 'cause they're-
process in
yeah.
that, right? There's
Yeah.
no third-party independent.
Yeah.
That's right. No
That's
third,
bizarre.
no third
All right.
party.
No arbitrator.
No.
Yes,
Right.
that helps a lot.
Yes.
Okay.
So you're beginning to see some of the problems with this trespass.
Yep.
So why is it important? We don't know if these numbers are still accurate. They could be higher, they could be lower. Because the data that we got was old when we asked for it, and it's older still now. But we, the HRC, are getting more and more complaints. And the complaints are usually not that they're discriminatory, which are the kinds of complaints that we can handle, but that they are unfair or unjust. Trespass often feels unfair to the person who is accused of it. We don't have any demographics, hardly any demographics about who is trespassed and what they're trespassed for, what kind of behaviors it involves. But the Ann Arbor, this thing in this very tiny print here says that you cannot claim trespass for any protected class, discrimination for, you have to have another reason. You could have any reason. In fact, Chief Farnes gave as a reason, as an example of what you could suggest, is that somebody is wearing an MSU hat in your bar. You can
Or
get rid
Ohio
of it.
State.
Or Ohio State, or whatever. I mean, you actually don't.
It would be worse.
The person can almost call out anything except that saying it's because of your race or because of your whatever.
Can I stay with that tiny writing for 1 second?
Sure.
In that tiny writing, it says, cannot be based on actual or perceived, and it lists age, arrest record with an asterisk, color. Do they mean ethnicity when they say color?
I don't know what they mean.
Okay. I'm just checking, maybe that
Wait,
there
what
was.
paragraph is that?
It's in that little teeny paragraph.
Frankly, they have not actually said what is in the Human Rights Commission ordinance, or the non-discrimination ordinance,
Or this-
and one of the things we'd like is that them to at least quote it accurately.
It also says familial status, which should be family status is usually the way we think of it, right?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that is how it's, what it's.
I'm just reading it here.
Yeah, said in the ordinance. They've left out some things and changed some of the wording. And it should state.
Because race comes later, race, religion, sex,
Mm-hmm.
sexual orientation, so I can't figure out what color is. But okay, go Zainab.
I just
Yeah,
want to
so-
clarify.
I think the real ordinance says ethnicity, but I'm not sure.
That's
I
weird.
think it says color and ethnicity. You know, this ordinance was written in stages.
Okay.
So-
You had a question, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go.
When you said that we have very little demographic information
Yes.
about trespassers, do you mean those that are accused by the agents or the police of trespass, or people that have been officially convicted for it? If that makes
We don't have information about either.
sense at all.
No.
Like we don't have any idea.
I mean, they hand counted for me once, and I was told that 48%, I think, of the
46.
people were, yeah, okay, were 46% were white males. I mean, they just sort of, I don't know why they did that, but they counted weird things. 15.39% ranged from 45 to 49.
Okay.
I don't know why but those are the ones, that's what they counted.
So you're saying we need some better data?
We
They don't
definitely,
have a record-keeping system.
Yeah.
well, they
That's
did.
their biggest
These were
problem.
like,
I
Might
know.
need one.
I mean, somebody
They
hand
count
counted this.
Everything.
And why
They
they hand
what?
counted these, why they chose what
Everything's
they.
kept paper still, so a lot of times they go back to file cabinets and have to hand count through records to give us the answers we need, because they don't have, the police department itself does not have.
They have computers in their
paper.
cars and they,
Right, so that stuff gets then printed out and then filed, and then they have to hand count.
but they don't enter this in the car
That's the other
thingy.
thing.
I
That-
witnessed
that
one
doesn't-
and I thought it was, am I right along?
Not all
I
their
don't think
I
when
don't
they
think
do
so.
trespass they do. I don't
My,
think this
the
one
policy
thing.
says they type in this form, so I think
Yeah,
it is now typed in.
Oh, it is?
And was not
So
before.
recently they may.
I think
We know how
so.
new that is.
I think so. We have a new policy, and the new policy says something about entering it in, and
How
I was
old's
hoping.
that been, like a year maybe? I
The new
wonder if-
policy was 2019.
I wonder if that's how they pull these
I will
numbers.
just say
Oh, no, they
anecdotally,
didn't.
on my ride
He
along,
They did it
that was
first.
done by,
Trespass.
yes,
Yeah.
that's probably true, because they did
That's
not
probably
have them when we looked into it.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
continue.
Okay.
Oh, wait,
Commissioner Long, I mean,
oh,
you wanted to say something, Jane?
no, I was just gonna,
she
you got
mounted.
my anecdote. It was a ride along that I did. AATA has a security, they use a security company at the Blake Center. And so this officer I was riding along with, the dispatch call, dispatched this officer to Blake. They were called by AATA's security company. And I know they gave I didn't know, pink, green, yellow, or, whatever the form was, but I observed, and I was invited to get out of the car. This individual was handed, piece of paper, the officer explained it, and then when he got in his car, he did type in, that was just my one
Okay. So,
eyewitness, experience.
we probably could get statistics, and that would be
Yeah.
very wonderful.
Right.
We really need those. So, trespass
Bonnie.
also, I'm sorry, is there?
No, you.
No, we're good, keep going, sorry.
It often feels discriminatory or unfair, and these are some of the reasons. So because you can be trespassed for any reason other than for a protected class, it is not always clear to people that that the reason that is given isn't a thinly disguised excuse for discriminating against a protected class. Also, some alleged trespassers argue that the reasons that were given to them for being trespassed were unfair or untrue. We have heard that they were incorrectly identified by a store manager as somebody who was seen shoplifting at a previous time, or somebody who'd been disruptive at a previous time. Maybe they were sitting next to somebody who started a fight, and people assumed that they were part of this fight. Maybe they had headphones on and they were sitting in a waiting area, and the singing of the music they were singing to the music and it was too loud. Maybe they were told they were blocking a store entrance when they took extra care not to do that. Maybe they were evicted from their apartment, not able to collect all their belongings. Basically, what they thought was, I wasn't doing anything wrong and I was just hanging out, so why am I being thrown out of this place? We've heard all those excuses, or all those complaints that they were unfairly thrown out of a place and trespassed. The police aren't expected or charged to listen to arguments, as we just said. with reading Trespass, it's almost as though the only way somebody could win their case is to negotiate it with the owner afterwards, and the owner may already be biased. So as David said, there's no neutral party at all. Blanket punishment can be appropriate in some cases and severe in other cases. We talked a little bit about that. Even the owners often really don't want the person to be gone for a whole year. I mean, these are, sometimes they're paying customers and he happens to be drunk one night or something. But no one asks the owners either what they want done. And we think this is a 1-year blanket is not at all fair. If you are trespassed from a public park, it's a different law, but the period that you're prohibited from being back in that park is only a day, just so you know.
May I ask a question? When the police comes and deals with a trespasser, is there any kind of video of that or not?
Yes.
Do they have to record that?
Yeah,
Because
should be.
it's
Yes.
why I'm saying that, because in the future, if we're going to be dealing with this issue, it's something that probably would ask for.
That's right. Well, people come to us if they feel like they've been discriminated against. They will start coming to you because if they feel like it's being unjust. And people will, we do have, and we've been referring some people to you.
And I have a question about that. So if we do, we're viewing that specifically so that we can get the body cam video to see what happened in the situation. We're not necessarily reviewing it because it's a complaint against a specific police officer. It's about the what occurred between the reporter, why the reporter made the call, why the reporter was asking for trespass to be read, and then just what occurred during the process. But there's not necessarily a complaint against a police officer.
So if Starbucks says, hey, black
Right,
people,
that's
you
right.
guys are just sitting here
Right.
and we want you out,
Right.
and you call the police and the police come, there is body cam footage of the police telling the people to leave the Starbucks, but there isn't necessarily on that footage the manager telling them to leave or the
Right.
manager
Right.
saying why they
Right.
had to leave.
right.
So there would just be evidence that, there could potentially be evidence, but
But
usually
right.
they've had that conversation with the people before the police even come.
Or you're gonna get an interaction between the police officer and the manager. You may get that on the body cam.
Muhammad and then
Yeah.
Jane.
Why I'm asking that, because supposedly that this person who was trespassed or was informed to leave and not came to us and filed a complaint. This is where we are. We are
Right.
not part of the process. We have to review these complaints. We are
And
not reviewing
right.
the ordinance, we are not reviewing any of that stuff. We are reviewing if there's any complaints from any of the individuals.
And in this case, the complaint, it's a different type of complaint because usually the ones we have right now that we have our sheet for are complaints specifically against the behavior of officers. This wouldn't necessarily be that because the officer may have been very kind, very respectful, did the job he or she was supposed to do, but the unfairness is between the person who received the trespass and the reporter. That's where
Starbucks.
Right.
the unfairness comes in. So this is kind of a new situation for us as far as the reporting and how we, so that's why I want to clarify that, because I want a
And
better
so-
understanding of that.
Leslie made the distinction earlier about discrimination. If the person says, I don't want any African American chicks in my Starbucks, and they say that to you, this is obviously a Human Rights Commission
Right.
issue.
Right.
Right.
If
If they say, I don't want any OSU people,
then apparently that's fine,
that's fine.
right? Because that's not a protected class.
That's right, that's right.
And so part of the problem is, and I know we've had an interaction with at least one of the people that you mentioned, the person who was singing and it was too loud and there were some curse words. They weren't cursing at anyone, but they were singing with their music that had curse words in it, and they were asked to go. Their complaint is not based on a protected class. They weren't asked to go because of that. They were asked to go because of their music and their singing, cursing. But the complaint they have is with the establishment that asked them
That's
to
a good
go.
word, yeah.
They don't actually
Exactly.
even have a complaint with the police. They
Right.
have a complaint
Right.
with the establishment that
Right.
let
Right.
them go.
But you have
Asked them to go.
you have a part in this, because you are also looking at police policy. And policy has a lot to do with this, because discretion has a lot to do with this. And you can guide the discretion.
So, and I guess I need more information on what that discretion is.
Yeah.
Well, the discretion.
The whole room did that. Jane, were you gonna, and then Ali?
Just quickly, thanks. I was just going to suggest, but this is, right, there's policy and what HRC does, what we do. Just with regard, this maybe more for HRC, the reporter, I don't know if you've looked into this, but I would imagine that background information on the report itself that was filed could be obtained from dispatch. Because they're the ones that then dispatch the officer to go issue the trespass or do whatever. But they are the recipient of the call.
Mhm. Who is? I mean, I'm
It's
sorry.
we have a
what are you
joint
asking me?
county-city dispatch.
Yes, but what are
and
you saying? Are you asking a
That they
question?
might have been given some
The
details?
reporter
There should
would
have been.
call, that's
There might be something
who
on
the
the
business, the
Okay.
whoever,
It's
the
not on the
homeowner, the Lake Transit Center, yeah, they call dispatch then calls police, and off they go.
So that might be a source of information, is what you're
Yes,
saying.
thanks.
Got it.
Okay.
Ali?
Well, I just appreciate the deep thought that's gone into this and try to extricate, the different scenarios and where does this fall, what sphere doesn't belong in. So I definitely appreciate this conversation. I just, it seems like there's when the police act as the owners, then we have all that evidence and we can see if there's something misconduct happening. And then obviously we have these other type of cases where it's not the police reading and the informational as well as enforcing the criminal, where we don't have the full complete picture. So I just wanted to comment on it. I just it's good to have this discussion and try to sharpen the mind and the pencils as to how to address the problem, what kind of problem we're trying to fix.
Okay, yes, I couldn't tell if that was a hand, Zainab. That
Oh,
was
no,
not a
it's
hand. Go, David.
So, are we saying that in the case of a private residence or a business owner, the police really don't have a choice? I mean, if you called and said, hey, I want this guy out because he's just being disruptive,
Right.
they gotta read a trespass.
Actually, no.
Right, so that's
I
the
had a
question.
conversation with the police today about that.
Because if they,
They can say no.
That's the
To
discretion.
the property owner?
Yes, they can. I'll let Jude go and then
yeah,
I'll
so
tell
let's hear about that.
Yeah. Well,
Because this is
go
a
ahead.
tricky kind of understanding what,
Because they do have the ability to say no and have, and they gave me an example today.
go ahead.
Yeah, and I know anecdotally we've seen them through Avalon, where we and our client have been requesting a trespass on somebody and the police won't do it. Like the tiniest amount of well, do they live here? Show me that you live
Well,
here.
so-
Here's a sweater on the floor. That's the extent of it. You have both the property owner and the legal leased resident there both requesting it to happen, but it's been very inconsistent as
So,
well.
all right, so that clear, because you don't, it's a property right. Are they a tenant or not? Have they lived here? How long have they slept here? And so the police department is appropriately so, and that's a civil court problem. But so it's a little bit less of that question, a little more of the Starbucks question,
My
or even
example
the
might
bus
help you.
station
So this
question.
was an example of an establishment that asked a person to go. And called the police. And when the police arrived, the establishment did not say we want this woman to go because she's black, but the police officer discerned that.
Right.
based on whatever else they said, and they said, we will not remove this person, that we will not re-trespass,
Right.
because you can't do that. And the establishment was very unhappy, and then the woman said, actually, I don't feel comfortable here anymore.
Right.
And so now I would like to leave, but I can't because the person I'm here with is actually at the conference, and so they have the transportation, and I'm not from here, but I feel uncomfortable here and I'd like to go, and the police took the person to another place.
Wow.
I think the other thing is as well is it's really inconsistent. That's a big part of it, is the inconsistency, where it really is, it's left so wide that it is absolutely not even officer to officer, it's
Exactly.
officer on a certain day to officer on a certain day. That's part of the issue.
And there's
And the-
nothing,
And the
yeah.
problem with it, so I've been sitting here writing, trying to get an empirical hold. And I don't think it's like the more I hear about it, because you'd also need to, like, there's some easy information you could glean from 2 years worth of these reports, right? Where are they happening, what's going on, and that's an easy request. But you'd also need to know then is how many times they got called to a trespass and refused it. And even if you got that data, I'm not sure what that
Yeah, like-
tells you. I mean, that sounds like an extraordinary, you can't imagine that happening too much, what you just said.
Well, especially not the transportation aspect of it.
Yes.
However, there are times when they come and they discern that this
Right.
might be a protected thing, and they don't re-trespass. Maybe they feel like the person doesn't have the right to ask for trespass removal.
Right.
And,
So
and
that's a
getting
different
data
one,
on
right.
stuff that doesn't happen is super hard. Not that we shouldn't try. I'm just saying I can see the challenge in that.
Yeah.
That would be like calls that were dispatched but nothing happened, and then you'd have to ask why, and it'd be all retrospective data, and that'd be really hard. But we know that there's discretion and that they do exercise discretion, different from person to person, officer to officer, situation to situation, and day to day within the same office,
Like every other aspect.
like every other aspect.
And
enough.
sometimes
So-
the discretion is good.
Right.
Besides
Right.
the procedural stuff the procedural order that each officer gets, do we know anything about the specific training that an officer
That's-
might have
yes,
gotten
that's
about
important,
trespass?
right.
So that discretion can be sort of,
One of the things that we'd be interested in is specifying more training in certain places and putting some of that in the policy that you ask about, that you make sure that we are not, it says that there's a statement that you can't trespass because of discrimination, but there's nothing that says you have to ask about it. Make sure that that's not the case. There's some training that you can do to make that.
And it might be slightly easier to, when someone calls for a removal, to just remove the person and not exercise discretion, when perhaps you should be exercising some. And so I had a conversation with Deputy Chief Forsberg today about trespass and about the variation between officers and within officers, and how to manage that. And training was a point of that conversation. And the fact that they need to enforce that they need to, when they know that people are being, that there's too much variation between and within, that is an aspect of something that they need to correct.
right,
I think there is a little bit of work for us to do on the policy side, though, even with the form, just in terms of things that we could ask that could be documented. But I think there's some work for them to do too, in terms of making sure that at least there's a little bit of reliability, statistical reliability between people in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing and how they're responding to calls and what they're asking and how they're exercising discretion. And is it, if it's a cute girl, then we're gonna, but if it's, big, strong black guy who looks scary, we're gonna do X. And that can be problematic.
It seems to be one of the fixes here. And so there, if you want it afterwards, there's something I wrote here that will get you that information, gleaned from the fields on the form in a pretty, but it seems to me the fix, and again, this is a little bit based on my experience with this older lady who sells ground cover, is paranoid about which square of concrete she is on, that she claims she wasn't on when she got trespassed the first time, and she just lives in fear, waiting for this year to run, trying to, to do what she does because she has no right of redress.
And that problem, part of the problem is that on her form, it says the whole building. It does.
Yeah, well, but it's not just about her, right? It's about anyone.
No, I know. I mean, where it is isn't defined because.
That's right. So it would seem to me that contemplating an ordinance revision to provide some sort of third party, I mean, you could use a friend of the court or the dispute, some third party mechanism for people to go in and challenge the factual foundation for the initial ticket, so that they don't have to, that removes the specter, that a real right of redress for what essentially is a quasi-criminal penalty in the first instance, just getting this notice,
Right.
because it's the predicate for a crime.
Exactly.
And so
But that's an ordinance revision. Now, whether that's a policy thing that this group wants to discuss and maybe promote or whatever, but that to me seems like one of the fixes that at least smooths out on the back end the variations that you're discussing.
And next month, Attorney Slay has volunteered to come to talk a little bit about that, about some potential diversion programs or addressing on the back end. So it'd be good to do the back end, but also the front end. But that is a possibility and something that they're thinking about, and so she's gonna come talk about trespass too. But I thought we should do the education piece first as a group, and then we'll have even more questions.
What I'm
Like
hoping,
these.
what I'm proposing is that we work together with the AAPD and the city attorney's office to come up with some solutions. Some of them may be ordinances, some of them might be police policies, some of them might be unsolvable.
And you mentioned several times that the chief has asked you
Yes, and the chief has asked,
for this
also
kind of clarification and guidance, and so he has
says that he
said
would welcome the guidance.
to help make
Screw.
it more standardized and across the board as well. So, Mohammed.
I would suggest that, I think we have been really going over this for a long time. I think to end this on a positive note, I would suggest that we form a subcommittee from ICPOC and Human Rights Commission to work on these policies and work with the city, work with the police department, and then say within like 2 months, we can revisit this and see where we are. Because what I see over here is we have been in this business for over 8 months, and we have done nothing to the community. We had not even showed one case that were reviewed and we came up with results, we came up with anything to help the community. And then we are going to add more cases, 300 cases of trespassing. It's just insane. I think if we move into having a subcommittee to deal with these issues and come back and address what they came up with, what are the new policies, and how we can remedy some of the injustices, some of the, what people see that it's unfair, that becomes a bit more clear, whether to the individuals as well as for the ones who are implementing the policies.
And you said
It's good to
what your
me.
summary was, so?
Yeah, I can tell you. This is really what we would like to have happen. I think that our meeting, a small group of us and a small group of you would be fine. I think there's a lot of things we could do that would be low-hanging fruit and some that might be a little bit more harder, but it would be worth our while. Do we need?
As you all read this earlier, I know I made notes with questions. Do you all have any questions about these things that have not yet been answered? All the materials, I know was a lot that you had. Before we let Leslie go.
I mean, I guess I'm
Thank you.
still just really confused about how, it's my understanding that like a minor can't even be interrogated by the police without like a parent or guardian, but this like year punishment can be given to them.
That's right. That's another piece of this.
Like, just baffled.
There are many pieces to this, lots of little pieces. But they need to at least, there has to be something to make sure that the parents of the minor are informed. Yes. And perhaps they're treated a little bit differently.
And you guys should, keep asking questions and making notes, because we will have a little, obviously not, this is an extensive review with Attorney Slay next month, but we will have some conversation about it. And we're certainly happy to come up with a small group of people to work on this, so people who have an interest in this, we can send out a call to do that as well. But we do need to keep asking questions like this and trying to figure out what kinds of things are within our bailiwick and where we can be useful in terms of giving the chief some guidance and working with these things that are out here, because it is a little murky for everybody, and I know they don't feel so comfortable with it.
Thank you. I think it's a great summary. And then just in general, as with anything, really, if we're going to go the subcommittee route of both HRC and ICPOC, which I also think makes a lot of sense, and you can take a deeper dive into this and bring back, educate us further, bring back some recommendations. But as you go forward, if that's the approach, it would help, I think, to know, because I noticed on the procedural, and thanks again as well for all this information that you provided us, the procedural orders and on the policies, it references CALEA as a source, and so I presume that these are CALEA standards. It indicates that. It would be helpful to know what the CALEA standards are for processing, both kinds of trespass infractions, and just, in general benchmarking of other communities, what they do. And I don't know if there's, if state laws, guide what we can or cannot do, or if it's all, on a federal level that establishes the rules for this. Sorry.
Did you say, I think last time we met, did you mention that our ordinance is based on the state?
It's based on the
statute?
state. We have a city ordinance and a state trespass
And they're pretty
law.
much the same.
Yes.
So if we were to make changes within our ordinance, we can do that.
Yes. Yes, we can.
And the policy is written pursuant to the ordinance, so the policy makes
Exactly.
pretty clear, unless the officer sees that it's being put forward
Like
for
you
a
said,
prohibited thing,
Yeah.
age, race,
Right.
or whatever, they've gotta write the notice if the owner asks.
That's right.
It's not a
Right.
can, it's not a might, it's like the officer shall write the trespass
Right.
notice.
Right.
Because it's that enforcement of the private right. It's interesting.
Yeah. No, it is interesting.
And that does sort of factor into some things. I mean, we'll have to take that into account as we think about changing some things, because, for example, the year term length is consistent across the county, at
Yes.
least. And so one of the reluctances to change that or to add a 90-day or a 6-month to it is that then it might be different in one jurisdiction versus another. Just a consideration,
I
not that we should, yeah.
But
And even more room for discrimination.
well,
Like who gets a year versus who gets 30 days.
well, that,
Yeah.
yes, there are questions.
So we
about-
should, so we do need to keep thinking about these topics and pondering them, and then certainly a subcommittee can do a deeper dive and then come back and report to everyone.
Right. And we ought to think also about educating people once we have something and it's agreed upon. Because the community doesn't know, and so,
And there are a number of calls. I mean, there actually, this is an issue about which the community is really concerned. So I would say that this is not necessarily, so this isn't nothing. There are a number of calls that Denise fields all the time to us about this. And so this is a piece of what we need to do for the community if it is resolving it and doing education and trying to be clear and at least being consistent, you know, with the police, across the police, and our understanding of what's discrimination, what's misconduct, who is being unfair to whom. But this is a thing about which she does receive a bunch of calls, so it isn't just a theoretical discussion. This is a real conversation that people have who are in distress, who call and say, hey, this is not fair and I want to file a complaint against the police. And then it has to say, actually, that's Starbucks. But we need to be able to provide more information and more relief than that, I think.
Right, and this is a big part of trust, community police trust, that could be dealt with.
And then the bottom line issue was the concern that it was being applied disproportionately to some groups than others.
Right.
And so that's always a concern, so I don't mean to not say that.
No.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure being here, thank you.
Was it really though? Okay, so after that, right, I was just gonna say, so thank you for that presentation and lots of notes on things that we need to follow up on. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm gonna abstain because I wasn't here.
Okay. That is fair, maybe.
Watch it, but not.
Yeah, it is approved. Because you could read. And so, old business, we have an update on the logo? Did you
This was
bring
from
that?
last month, we said we were gonna talk about it again.
But do we have your picture?
Should be an email or sent it.
She didn't send me.
I never
Hold
saw
on,
it.
I'm looking for a graphic for everyone. I know it looks like I'm playing on my phone, but I promise I'm not.
Experience with these. Do you?
Thank you.
I'm taking chemistry.
Yeah.
Did you memorize that? Yep. Oh my God.
Jamie could never do it.
Yeah, I can. You all had several requests the last time we discussed the logo.
Yeah.
There was a request to make the initial in each word larger, but it was not larger enough, if I remember correctly. The overlapping of the hands was noticed.
Right.
And so Kim Morton with the city was able to un-overlap the hands. Give me your other hand. And so now there are 3 hands, okay, whatever, like that now.
Your nails look better than mine.
Thank you. Not so good. So I will forward the logo to each of you. I believe I actually did though after she
Yeah.
did her last revision, but I will do
I
it
saw
again.
Yeah.
And if you could reply back, if you have any further corrections, if not, we can get it done. And I know it's a very small thing, but it does mean that, you know, stationery and things like that can be used as we communicate.
My only thing is, yes, we are going to have the first letter of each word as different font, different size. If we have a different style, that would distinguish it.
I am so
Each
sorry.
letter have, each first letter,
First letter
for
is-
each word, a different font style?
You just want it to be distinct from
Distinct.
the others.
It will be the same style for each of the first letter of each word.
Okay,
But it's different than the rest of the letters
word.
of the word.
I get
So
you.
it's like
Okay.
6 out.
okay.
All right, when I send it around, please review it and let me know.
And I can send it back to her.
Thank you, and then we can be done. So, new business.
So we are, we talked in our previous meeting more in detail about the changes with regard to the review process of the complaints and how we're gonna get more into a flow where we're gonna get the information more from PD within the 30 days and so on, and how we're gonna go about doing that with them having to make the redactions that are necessary. So since our last meeting, City Council has approved a lieutenant position for the PD, and part of that person's responsibilities will be to facilitate getting information to us in a more timely manner. So that'll be part of the way that we'll get reports more regularly. We do have an updated spreadsheet that we received. So since the last time we got it, which I believe was in November or
Correct.
October, we have 2 more additional complaints that came in, not to our commission, but through the police department. And what we are looking to do with these spreadsheets is we will meet twice a month with the police department and review which ones we want more information on. Some of them, they will give us a more detailed report, and that may be able to give us the information we need to either ask more questions, or basically what we're looking at is, the biggest time constraint on PD is editing the videos. So if there's a situation where we may not necessarily need to see the video, it just saves a lot of time with how we're able to do our investigation. So there are, starting this Wednesday, a review, just kind of a preliminary thing. We're gonna take a look at what their new, more detailed report is gonna look like, see if it's something that we actually can use, and then we'll start setting up regular reviews with the group, and we'll need to figure out how we wanna do the teams of 3 or 4 to do the reviews.
Who decides which footage is worth looking at, or
The
necessary?
team will.
The team.
So the review team, if you remember, we had like groups of 3 that were
Right.
rotating.
We're about
We'll
to do that
figure
over
that.
right
Present
now.
to the rest of the body.
No, just the group of 3, and then the group of 3 does a report that gets reported to the rest of the body.
So everybody, all 11 folks won't show up at the police department and watch the video.
Right, but as far as the footage that's being removed.
You,
Oh,
like,
being removed, I didn't realize that was your question,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
So,
That's done by the police department pursuant to lien requirements.
so, we were watching a video, where the officer was dealing with the complainant, and he had his radio on still, and there was information about an unrelated case that came across the radio
Right.
that we shouldn't be privy to. So
Okay.
the video stayed on, but that sound went away. He had another person's driver's license in his hand, and they blurred that, because we shouldn't
Right.
have seen that. So those are the kinds of things that get redacted from from video footage.
I foresee this being used, I guess if I'm speaking negatively, to cover something.
You would
do we-
worry that some things might get removed
Yeah.
that were relevant.
I don't suspect it would be very prevalent, but I can see that happening should
So that
somebody
has
have the
happened
intent-
before,
Right.
not, we don't know that in Ann
We
Arbor.
don't know.
But we watched a case where that had happened, where the person actually removed
Yeah.
the behavior that was
But
egregious.
it was edited differently than ours. So what
So-
happens with ours is you still see the image. Like, for instance,
Okay.
when the officer was holding the driver's license, only the driver's license was blurred out.
You still see the hand, so there are
You
no
still see-
cuts.
Right,
Gotcha.
it's not actually cut. It's just blurred, or the noise is blocked out, like when somebody curses on television
Alright.
and all of a sudden it goes blank. That's what it does. Or things are name tags or things like that are blurred.
But the video doesn't stop.
Right.
So should somebody on the team see some sort of inconsistency or cut, we can immediately bring it up as a
Right.
concern.
Right, and one of the
Okay.
things we learned at our NACO training was how to look at data files to see whether there's a discrepancy between the video and the data file.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so that has been a concern across the country. And there was a court case
Yeah.
about that very thing. So that is not that's not an ill-advised question.
So the video that I saw at the NACOL event, it was cut. and you could tell, because you could tell that at one point they were at this end of the hallway, and then all of a sudden they were at this end of
Right.
the hallway. And that, so when I sat and watched ours, I was very interested in how that would play,
Gotcha.
but it doesn't cut like that.
Right. Jane, you were gonna say
I
something.
was just gonna, but Francis, just for everyone's information, as you noted, this position, I was just gonna.
Oh, the
just
position, yeah.
a teensy-weensy little bit of background on this position that was added. So council approved adding this position at the January 6th meeting. Dr. Jackson wrote a nice letter to city council in support of it. I know Dr. Jackson wanted to be there, but she was under the weather, as was our vice chair, Francis. So, but the letter was,
We did have a rough break.
was excellent and very helpful. Just quickly, it's a new FTE. It's an audit and review lieutenant position, and the rationale that was provided us in the cover memo from Chief Cox was that the position was needed to provide a, quote, audit and review capability that currently does not exist, end quote. A proper audit function is a critical aspect of implementing a community policing approach. Quoting from the memo, he said the police chief's ability to develop and implement innovative community policing practices is restricted by the lack of resources. Analyzing reports and video footage provides the opportunity to develop case studies and learning experiences, contributing the practical and professional development of police officers. Another bullet, quote, information requests from the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission are backlogged, hindering the ability of the commission to perform its functions. So, in this memo that was sent to us and accompanied this recommendation, essentially the primary need is for the Independent Police Oversight Commission to provide support. So that's just the background on that, and it required 8 votes of council, and again, it was approved January 6th.
Unanimously.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thanks.
We watched you.
Oh, you
Yes.
did?
We did.
Oh, yeah.
We did. We were under the weather.
But we
were
had
watching.
and we were texting each other while watching.
I just wanted to provide you that background.
And just to be clear, I know Chief, as he described the position, and the city manager gave us some background on the position as he made his case for the funding. That position has several responsibilities in it. And so I don't know if we're the primary one, but we are optimistic that that person will be helpful to us in doing this kind of stuff faster, because they'll already be doing those kinds of things for the police department. And so there are like 8 duties of this job when they find the person, and we are one of those. But we're helpful optimistic that it will be helpful to us
And
to
just
do this. And
again, this person is supposed to start, according to the resolution, no later than February 1st.
you were gonna do more, right?
Yeah, so we are going to, I think, look at that rotating basis of how we were doing the 3 people. Because one of the things that have come up when we did review the video is that we can only review these things from like 8 to 4 during the day, during police working hours, basically. So, sometimes it's hard. Something comes up, somebody can't be there, and you want to make sure you have at least the majority of the group for that review or that day to be there. So I don't know if we want to set up teams as opposed to rotating, but Owen has a question.
Yeah, go figure.
Your face.
This is just real quick. Is that a hard time frame they're setting up from 8 to 4? That's the only time that this commission is able to see that? I mean,
Not us, the police dictated that.
Yeah.
What do you know the absolute time frames are given, or?
I can't. What is Bonnie's time? What
She
does
said
work?
she has the flexibility, usually in the afternoon,
Okay.
1 to 4.
Yeah, that's
But
what
it
I,
depends
But it
on-
was,
yeah.
it really was, they gave us a hard,
Yeah.
and it has to be there.
Yeah, at the
Can't be,
Justice Center.
yeah, it has to
Right.
be in the
Justice
justice,
Center, yeah.
and it has to be between those hours.
And I think part
because
of
of
it-
who has to do
Yeah,
it.
because
Yeah.
of who
Maybe
has
this
to do
new
it and
person.
overtime.
We'll be able to work later.
Yeah, I would
But I
try to
send,
advocate for more availability. That
Ability.
seems
Yeah.
very
more
restrictive.
flexibility on it.
Yeah.
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 well, and given that we are a civilian
Group.
Volunteers.
oversight,
Volunteer,
which
right.
means that most
You have
people
jobs.
go to work during the day.
I wonder if they'd be able to avoid the overtime if we have the scheduled dates, like we're saying we're trying to do, like every so often on Wednesday, they know, all right, well then somebody comes in
That's a good
later on
suggestion.
Monday to account for the time that they have to be there on Wednesday that week.
And hopefully, as of February 1st, which is that's Friday, we'll keep having those conversations about how we can work that out, because I sent an email to all of you and I asked you who can do this. If it's 8 to 4 or 1 to 4, who can show up during that time to do that? And I know some of you said you could, some people didn't respond, but we do need to make the teams from who can do that. However, if we can get the person to come from, 6 to 8 or 4 to 7, then that certainly opens it up
Hopefully they
more for more of us to be able to do it.
Right.
But we do, there are documents that we can only see in this way, and certainly all of the body cam and dash cam footage can only be viewed this way. Actually, not documents, but the video footage from body or car can only be viewed in this manner. And so right now we have that limitation. My intent was to ask you all for a hard yes, no right now. Can you do this? We're gonna go Wednesday. So what is it? Tomorrow? No, day after tomorrow. I think we're meeting on Tuesday. Sorry, day after tomorrow, and we're gonna have a trial run through with them. It won't involve any video footage, and we're gonna see what their enhanced reporting looks like, as Francis mentioned earlier. But going forward, I would expect towards the middle of February or the beginning of March, we'll start looking at more camera footage in earnest. We will be able to clean up, I think, some of the ones that we have been sitting on for asking little tiny pieces of information. And hopefully this person will be able to be more flexible in that to meet the needs of a civilian oversight commission. I know that, so I will send another email and I will ask you all if you are interested in reviewing such information. Please respond, and then we will just set up some standing teams of 4 people. And we'll just rotate those teams. So we are not going to do the one person and then the other 2 people rotate out. That was too complicated. We're just gonna have 3 different teams of folks, and we will alternate. One group gets a case, the next group, the next group, the next group, just to make it a little bit cleaner. And those teams will only be comprised of people who can view the video when the police can show it to us, which we hope will have more flexibility and not even more flexibility, but just a later time frame to account for people going to work. And so that'll be our goal. And I expect that since the person will be coming on soon, we can negotiate that. And we will certainly be asking for that, and you guys can back us up on that.
Yeah, and I have a big problem with this, I just frankly do. I mean.
With the 8 to 4?
Yeah, it's just, it really just.
The thing is, I just will say they work shifts, and I know just with another committee, we would always have to schedule the liquor committee, with a certain officer at a certain time, another lieutenant, because if it didn't fit within the shift, then it was overtime, which is not to say, I think that we need to look at this more
This is an
flexibly.
important
It's
commission.
important, and to make it possible for members of this committee to participate in this,
And
right?
all future committees.
Right, the 8 to 4.
Can't they just teach someone on
Window.
another shift how to
Yeah,
do it?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
It needs to be extended
Yes.
to 8.
Yeah.
It's professional standards.
Standards, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But
So it has to be-
it's,
And this video person should be able
Yeah.
to do this too.
but as Francis said, if we come up with specific times, then I don't see why they can't shift their schedule
Come in late.
Right.
to accommodate people's
Yeah.
work
And
schedules.
we've added 3 positions,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where you all can use your leverage.
Okay. We can help.
So I'll be coming to you guys and asking you who can participate in this process. And so please respond. I'm
Yeah.
done. Go, Francis.
And I'm going to, after our last meeting that we had with the representatives from the attorney's office and the police department, we had some questions, or I specifically had some questions about the ordinance and what our ability is to investigate, as opposed to the flow chart that was put together before. Because I feel like we're at the mercy of whenever PD is done with their investigation, and so we're just kind of sitting waiting. But when you read the ordinance, there is options that if the complaint comes to us, we can actually ask more questions. And it just kind of, and one of the attorneys, I think it was Chris Frost, was saying, well, there are some gray areas in the ordinance. So I would like to go through the ordinance again and see if we could come up with a process where we can take advantage of the opportunities where we can be doing some investigation, or at least questioning the complainant and getting some more information, as opposed to just being at the mercy of the police department.
And that's when people come to us.
And that's why we need to get the complaints come to us, and start coming directly through, from MCPOC and through Ms. Janess, because I think we do have a little bit more flexibility in our abilities from what I read in the ordinance and how
Investigate.
I interpret it, that we can be doing more.
And that's a matter of outreach. And getting people to understand that we exist and that they can come to us and that we have more ability to do some things with their complaints when they come to us. And I think there are many opportunities for us to do that kind of outreach, certainly in holding events at the library, et cetera. But on MLK Day, there were several organizations that had panels on law enforcement. And it would have been good for us to have been able to nose our way onto those panels. And I was on vacation, which I will try not to do next year on MLK Day, and insert myself into those, even if I have to be in the audience and ask a question about civilian oversight. But I hope that that's a goal that an endeavor in which we can all participate, because we do need to be in those forums talking about, when we're talking about law enforcement and community policing, which is an amazingly vague word and can mean anything. We need to ask critical questions about what that means, but we need to participate in the conversation about what civilian oversight is, what it does, and how this, how civilian oversight has been changing across the country and continues to change. And those are ways of oversight too. So that's one example. Another example included a movie screening of Just Mercy, where Chief Cox then went and gave a talk to Black sorority about the criminal justice system and people who were unjustly incarcerated and accused and convicted, et cetera. And that happened, that incident is a true incident, part of Brian Stevenson's story of the Innocence Project and the, but an equal justice initiative. But there are opportunities for us to do those kinds of things across Ann Arbor, and so I am going to commit to try to do that. But I think it takes all of us to try to think about situations in which we have an opportunity to talk about what we do and to talk about what civilian oversight is and what it means to have a police force that is accountable to having its interactions examined, because that's important.
Would you want to draft some sort of like consistent message so that everyone is on the same page about what that means within the commission, so that folks aren't going to panels and interpreting it at will?
Sure. That should be collaboratively drafted, though. I would not want that to be my statement about what I think it is. And I do think that it should have some flexibility to be situationally appropriate, though, right? So that if we're talking about
Depending on the group you're with.
sure, but and also, you know, the case. And I think we need to be creative too about the outreach that we do. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sarah, do you wanna take a stab at that?
I'd be, yeah, sure, and then I can,
Yeah.
whoever.
Circulate, I'll, whatever you want.
We
But-
have a flyer already, a trifold.
Yep.
I don't know if you've
Yeah.
seen that, but we have a brochure already,
Mm-hmm.
so that could be part of it.
The website?
You have a
Basically, we need
PDF
an
of it.
elevator speech.
Okay.
Right, an
Yeah.
elevator
Yeah.
speech.
She's
That's
gonna
all on the
join you on
website,
outreach.
yeah.
Anything
Cut
else
your-
about,
Am I, for Open Meetings Act, let me ask this question, if I draft something up, am I allowed to send it to everybody as a draft? Like, not discuss it, but just say, hey, here this is?
Yeah.
yeah.
They
And-
can,
and
right?
if you blind CC everybody,
Right,
when they reply,
right.
they can only reply to you, so it's not a
Right.
discussion.
Right, and they can send me questions
Yep.
and stuff? Okay.
So
cool.
just copy Denise and
Denise and
blind
blind
CC
CC
everyone else, and
everybody
then when they
else.
send it to you, it won't violate it, and then they can.
You can also
we'll
work
have
on
discussion.
a Google Doc that way,
Oh,
too.
you can?
Yeah, as long as,
Oh.
my understanding, as long as you're not, and post comments and the rest.
Deliberating.
Oh,
Right, but
okay.
as long as you're
Right.
not as a group kind of having a
Discussion.
chat,
Yeah, let's
Having a
go.
discussion.
totally
right.
fine.
Right.
That's a way, it's a good way to move documents forward.
Yeah. Cool, great.
Anything else on that one?
Nope.
Okay, so, outreach, got anything?
Yeah, we had the opportunity to meet earlier this month and just review, our committee's work the past year. We had 2 meetings out in the community. We added, I believe, 13 to 15 people to our email list. So, we shoot emails to them about our meetings and different things we got going on. We also started discussing, organizations and sites that we want to explore this coming year. We want to have at least 6 community meetings. The closest one I know Mohammed's working with the Islamic Center to see how we want to reach out to them. We also want to move forward with printing off our brochures, trifold brochures, so we can start getting copies out in the community, and everybody can have their own supply to give out when they speak about our commission. And also, we were looking at adding a 4th member to our subcommittee. Okay, that's great.
Ask and you shall receive. Budget.
Okay.
Wait. Any other committee need to report out before budget? Okay, just checking.
I don't know how long this will take, but.
It's okay, you got the.
So.
Oh, I'm sorry,
so-
Ali.
I just have a question on when you're out there with the community and these outreach. Is there a general theme, or is there kind of a,
Kind of like an agenda.
frequently asked question or concern, or what's the?
Well, we're looking into
What's-
creating a FAQ, but generally we start out with just telling the history of how it came about and the situations in the community that like started the conversation, and then we go into the objectives, the missions of the committee, and then we open it up for the community to ask.
So in the
Question.
community, what is the community saying in response to? Is there anything that resonates, or?
Well, the general theme is that they feel like our police department does a pretty good job for the most part. Now, our last meeting at Bryant Community Center had the most turnout, and like I said, they said they think generally the police do a good job. And they were also just speaking about how they really didn't know about the creation of our committee, so they did appreciate us, coming out to their community and reaching out to them.
Okay. Cool, thanks.
Take it away.
All right, budget. It's the most exciting thing. And first of all, I apologize that I don't have copies of it again at this meeting. Following the last meeting where Commissioner Evans gave a really good overview of it, we actually haven't had any changes in it. And so at this point, being conscious of timing when the city administrator needs it, I wanted to see if we could add into this agenda voting to approve to send the current version, the last one that was seen, through to the city administrator as our proposed budget. One thing I will say with that is that I think the key thing that he really needs to know is the bottom line, which hasn't changed from last year. It's the 150,000. He is much less concerned with the buckets and the breakdown and what's going where. And I presume that we will have continued time to work on that and refine that. But again, just to keep timeline working well, I wanted to see if people were open to having a vote but sending it forward to the city administrator. Unless there
And
are
I
any
had a
questions.
chance to chat with him about that today, and I mentioned to him that we did not expect our big picture dollar figure to change, and he was fine with that. But I was looking to see if I had a copy of it, and I don't have a copy of it. Is it because you guys showed it on PowerPoint? It was on the screen. The Excel file. Thank you.
I have the original draft of the notes, from November.
Oh, from November,
but not
okay.
the
Well, that
second.
was, yeah, it's,
Yeah, that was
that's
different.
not the current, because that
Right.
one's way higher.
Items are
and-
the same, you can update the numbers, wait, just walk through what the new numbers are.
So
Here's
the-
this might help
The
you.
bottom line's still 150,000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That has not, the first draft was higher, the second draft, the
Can you
rework
write
one that
down
came
the-
back.
Do we know how much money is gonna carry over from this last budget?
No
No,
money carries
we're not
over.
allowed to carry any
I
over.
mean, I shouldn't say carry over.
You mean
How many
non-spent?
votes?
Unspent, the
That doesn't
unspent.
happen with any budget.
I misspoke.
You meant-
I understand
you
that.
meant
Like,
I-
you've drummed that into our
Yeah,
heads.
Yeah. Not
I
that we're
misspoke.
gonna
That
have to
it carries over to our
Right,
general
right.
It
fund.
goes back to
It goes back to
I understand.
our bank account.
Doesn't
But
get carried over.
No, not for the commission, it doesn't. But
Or
what's
anybody.
unspent?
We don't know, but we can tell
know,
you.
but
Yeah.
it wasn't a full year this year.
No.
In terms of the city.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, they didn't true up, so.
We had a little bit tomorrow, and then we'll have June to, so we will have had a whole
Oh, that's, yeah,
fiscal
it would
year.
have been, yeah.
But, and Denise can tell you how much is unspent. I knew, but that was a little bit ago. And we just bought some books,
Yes.
because we're starting a library
We are.
from which we should all be borrowing and reading. And a boatload of journal articles as well. That was
Where's the
all of-
library?
That was all of it.
Yeah, where's it gonna be
$200.
stored? Is it virtual?
where's
Tiny amount of money.
In Denise's office? Okay.
Yes.
It's not a huge
Interlibrary
Yeah.
loan, or how does this work?
There are about 10 books, right? Yeah.
Wait,
I sent you all the titles.
Oh, you did?
I saw it, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
two things. One is just follow up on what Commissioner Caldwell talked about, the outreach, is we have expenses coming, like printing, and we need to really access some of the funds to cover that. The other thing is there a way that we could have some of these books like online we can access versus
All of the journal articles are PDFs, and I can send them
that
to
would be
all
that
of you.
would- that would be great to have those ones.
There's a lot. I'll be able to send them 3 or 4 at a time.
That's
But the books, there were none of these were ebooks. But
There's a lot, there's like 10 of them.
what? Books? Yeah.
We can bring them to the meeting then?
Oh, yes, I will. I will bring them to the meeting and pass them out if you want. Or I will send you the titles. If you want one, I will drive it to your house.
You might want to put them just in a box folder and invite people, that way the.
They're on her, she's made a library. Anyone is invited to go borrow
Second
them.
floor.
Oh, no, I
Go
meant,
check
like,
it out.
Box and
Dropbox,
box.
like a box, like, that way.
I could make a Dropbox.
That way people coming in, like,
Yeah,
that way you have
I
a
can-
virtual library.
I can put the PDFs in a Dropbox folder and share it with everyone.
Awesome.
Oh, I didn't think about that. I use Dropbox all the time. Okay.
no, the second one is about
Back to the
books.
budget.
Back to the
Thank you.
Back to the budget,
Yes.
yeah.
Can you, I'm wondering
Back to the
if,
budget.
and June.
It was budget related, I
Yeah.
promise.
No, sorry, but just, I appreciate all your work on this. If you could just pound through each, I mean, they're line item, and just give the draft 2 numbers.
Well, I don't know that I have those
Oh,
off the top of
okay.
my head. I can give you.
Can you just
rough.
resend it to all of us, perhaps?
Yeah, sure, I can certainly email it back out to everyone.
So the bottom line is the same. It's $150,000 as it was $150,000 last year. Lots of that goes to administration, which is well spent.
Yeah, and then some of
That's
it
the
is.
bulk of it.
Yeah, that's the bulk of it. There's still we didn't touch the legal amount that was in there, so that's still in at $25,000. The biggest area that got moved downwards from this draft was almost all of it came out of training. And so that was
travel.
reduced down. Yeah, the travel aspect for the Nicole conference. Again, there was the same way that Commissioner Evans brought up at the last meeting. We did discuss around, kind of removing all travel costs, and we do just think, particularly for this commission, that it's important that there is at least room for people that would not be able to financially do it, be able to go. That's super important. And not everybody. But, and it is noted that if people do want to pay for themselves, there's nothing prohibiting them, they're welcome to. But I do think we need to, but that was the single biggest cut we did was in that line item. And then there were largely kind of tweaks around in other places, but pretty small.
Yeah.
So if you all can think back to the December meeting, those of you who were here were largely glowing about the budget. You were not here. Anybody else who wasn't here? You all were here. Okay. Do you need to see this? I think we have a, do you want to?
That was the initial draft.
Right, and then you can,
If there are.
because we do need to kind of vote to approve this going to the city manager so that we can be in the pipeline
And
with all the
council,
other
yeah.
commissions, and he has a big, huge budget to put together.
And they're doing it right now.
Yes, he said that to me today. So we're gonna have a meeting, but I did tell him we'll be short because we're not changing.
So I make a motion that we accept the budget as presented at the last meeting in December.
Second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Oops, this got covered up. I'm so sorry. Are there any other communications from any other committees? We did, can move our public comments period to the end because it was at the beginning and we did not have anyone to comment. If anyone would like to make a public comment, you are welcome to do so. We have a 3-minute window. Denise is the timer, or Denise's phone is the timer.
Yes,
Come on, Denise.
come forward.
Just make it line, a virtual. There's not that many.
Thanks.
I'm coming.
Right there.
You guys are very entertaining.
You don't need to be.
Oh, this chair's comfortable. Anyways,
Okay.
my name is Sandra Riley, and I was cited a trespassing citation on October 23rd of 2019, and I called Denise the very next day, and she had met with me the following day. And I've lived in the community, I am part owner. The employees were the ones who cited me as trespassing, and they presented a partial affidavit from a year ago to the police officers that never went to trial, and there was alleged accusations. And they just showed them this piece of paper, and so then they said, you gotta get out of here. I was evicted illegally. I've lived there for 25 years in Colonial Square, and they didn't follow procedure, the settlement agreement and all this, and I filed a police complaint with the police department in the 15th District Court building, June 13th. And I have a CD of the court hearing, and I claimed, and I had witnesses and the CD of how, and forms, evidence of how management and employees of this place that I lived were lying on stand and even talking, it's like, they're supposed to be sequestered or whatever, I don't know what that, separate the people in the courtroom. We're going out to the people, the witnesses in the hallway and filling them in, and then the manager and other employees lied on the stand. And I filed this complaint, and the police officer's name's here, gave me a case number and blah, 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 and said someone would call me. I said I had a whole bunch of evidence and never called. And the next time I went up there, the following month, they closed it. No one ever called me, no one ever asked me for the evidence, nothing. It's the snowballed. They kept filing false affidavits and having people lie on the stand and all this stuff. And so I lost my home after 25 years. They served me eviction. I have a son, a daughter-in-law, and a grandson who live there. I missed trick-or-treating with my 7-year-old grandson. I missed his 8th birthday in November. And I'll be doggone if I want to miss my son is graduating from EMU in social work with 3 honors. And he has rented the community building for that. I've got family coming in, and I've been trying to fight this trespassing thing. I have 20% signatures of the people in the community, 86 signatures of people who didn't want me evicted, and that was part of Judge Valvo's order. And I presented this to the 22nd Circuit Court as part of my appeal, which I got in time. They evicted me. I was in New York at my niece's wedding. I came home, they said, you have 52 hours to get out. And I should be allowed to, in that community, I have family there, I have over 100 friends, that's where I made a living. I would do yard work, I would do gardening, snow removal, I'd take elderly people to doctors, pick up their prescription, clean their house. People have 24-hour, call me, I will come help you. And I did it for very small fees or a good home-cooked meal or whatever, you know, because I don't cook that well. But so. Anyways, legal aid never called me. I've been trying to, she even had, Denise had tried to have them call me. They don't call me. I had people call from other numbers. They called them right back. So it's like something going under, I don't know, but the judge knew that they didn't file, I was not to be evicted unless they followed the complaint policy procedure, and they did not. And she knew that, and she ordered an eviction on me. I was pro per at that time. And I tell you, I know my 3 minutes is probably up. They kept taking me to court for feeding a squirrel and all this crazy stuff, watching me with a camera on me. The neighbor had a camera in her window 24 hours, 24/7 for a year. They kept telling people that I was doing stuff and saying stuff. So I got a body cam to protect me, whatever. So now I am another homeowner in another town, another county. But it's very unfair. I should have never lost anything. And then I had 2 U-Hauls, and they kept putting stuff out on the curb. People were going through my stuff, and then they cited me for trespass. I had to leave that area. Well, why do I have to leave that area when that's where my stuff is? It's the city property. And then they said it to me again because I was still trying to retrieve my belongings. My grandma's china, photos.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
The trespass was read to you on what day? You said
October 23rd.
of 2019.
Yes.
And so it's a year trespass,
Mhm.
and your son still lives in
Oh,
that
yeah,
complex?
Not with
And-
me, we didn't, he had his own unit.
Right, right.
Mm,
And his
6 years.
graduation party will be there when?
This April,
In April.
from EMU.
Okay.
He's already doing his internship at the drop-in station for juvenile delinquents, and I mean, he's a prize. He's gonna be 30 in April also.
So
But I would like to, I tried to go to the birthday party of my grandson, and I asked for a police escort, and they wouldn't do it. I said, I just want to give him his present, because I had a really cool present, but they didn't. But that, closing that case on the perjury, who would allow these people to go into court and lie and file false affidavits and go on and on and on, and then they just closed it, no one ever called me. I had people willing to testify against these, and, you know, what's done is done. But I did provide a couple of people with someone else to take care of the snow removal. He's got these wonderful people with 2 metal knees, and, you know, but people do miss me and have called me and don't understand. And then I just found out today they took off $35,000 to sell the unit. I was supposed to get like at least $90,000, and my lawyer, who's a church family member who was doing a pro bono, said that they gave him a check for $54,000.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that we probably can't handle because of that, but I think it does bring forth the whole situation of trespass and, the length of trespass, and that there's no recourse.
There was no reason.
That trespass gets read to people, and then there's no recourse for them to fight against that trespass, and that's something that we'll
Right.
have to take on and
And the
really look
police
at.
just accept any form that the person who was trying to,
Yeah.
they accept it, I mean. And it even said, my description said gray hair, my hair is not gray. So, I don't know, but thanks for listening, I really
Thank you.
need to be, go to that graduation, because he's already rented the community building, you know. Do you think that I'll be able to?
That's beyond our purview.
Yeah.
Yes.
We
But-
appreciate you coming and sharing, but
Well, who
that-
should I contact next? Because Denise has kept contact with me ever since October on a regular basis and asked legal aid to call me. They didn't. They asked the police commissioner to call. He didn't. I don't, you know, I'm not, I don't know. But
Well, I think it's something that you can definitely
my
bring
phone
back to
number's
us. so
here.
that we
I
can-
don't have
I have,
email.
yeah, I have
Okay,
information.
And I don't
and
have
I
email. I
can
don't want
give you
email.
contact to
Thank you.
Ms. Riley, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Hi.
I'm Libby Hunter. I live in Ann Arbor. And this is short. One of the most important statements that was made at last week's city council meeting happened during the public comment time at the end of the meeting. The speaker was a young man who was homeless. He's spoken at council fairly often. He stated that he was concerned that we're adding officers to the force, 3 being hired recently, is what he said. So as an aside, I'd like to say that 33% of the city budget goes to the police department, but you all know that, and I'm just saying it. Anyways, here's what he said that jumped out at me when I watched the meeting. Since he's been going to the Delana Center, multiple people he's met have told him that they are targeted by Ann Arbor police. So the implication here is that they are targeted for race, class, and/or housing status. I don't know if city council members made note of this, what I consider to be a hugely important public commentary, but I did. Ever since finding out about the stories in the pamphlet that I meant to bring with me and I didn't, called Ann Arbor Police Stories, which I think some of you have seen, I understand that Ann Arbor has really the same problem which plagues American police departments from coast to coast. And one of the most terrifying things that can happen to a person in our country is to be targeted by police. So it's why your work is such a vital act of service, really the most important, one of the most important things anybody can do. So thank you so much. And please let me and others know what we can do to assist you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lori Saginaw. I live in Ann Arbor. I missed the beginning of the meeting because I didn't pay attention to the fact that you were here. But when I learned you were here, I was so happy. I feel at home in this space because the task force met here. And I think it allows for a lot more of the community to be at your meetings. I love that it's all on one level. So I'm going to work a lot harder to get more people to your meetings. And I wanted to offer to you, each of you, an educational piece for your use. It's a calendar that is made every year by a community member. And it's not a gift, because I know you're not allowed to receive gifts, but it is a resource. And it focuses on the Black community of Ann Arbor. So it's entitled The Village That Raised Their Children. And I've got 14 of them, and if one of you can give copies to the commissioners who aren't here tonight, I would be very appreciative.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I really need to mention, I wasn't evicted for non-payment. I was evicted because I kept approaching the board after our mortgage was paid off about how they were making the decisions on our finances and all that, because the chain of order goes in our community, members, board of directors, management. And I had saved everything since 1994 when I moved in there, so I had to ask them, well, you said this year, and you said this, and then it felt like political police. They did like anybody to make waves. Wasn't what they did pay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did everybody get one?
Yes.
Are we adjourned? Are we
No.
Need to move to adjourn.
I'd like to move.
Wait.
This is another.
Communications.
Before we move to adjourn, did we decide on the site for next meeting? Because it was not stated
Next week.
that it was
meeting.
available.
The meeting is at City Hall in the basement conference room.
I'm,
And it's
what's the
February
date again?
25th.
February 22.
No, they only had availability for this location in January.
Okay.
What's the date, sorry?
February 22nd.
That's a Saturday.
No, it's the
February
25th.
25th.
I have it for the
Tuesday.
25th.
25th, February
Tuesday,
25th.
correct.
6 p.m.
So it's going to be,
I have
I'm sorry, where am I?
okay, so
City Hall.
For
So
some reason,
basement-
oh no, that's a different
Yeah.
committee, sorry.
Yeah,
I don't have it down. February 25th, 6 o'clock.
I'll send you an email.
Thank you very much.
okay, move to adjourn the meeting.
And that's 6 o'clock.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed to adjourning? We are adjourned.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.